In the 18th and 19th centuries, a dark economy thrived just beneath the surface of society. It was a trade in the dead, driven by the living's desire for knowledge. The practitioners of this grim business were known as resurrectionists or body snatchers. They were the clandestine suppliers to a medical revolution, exhuming the recently deceased to serve the growing field of anatomy. For centuries, the dissection of human bodies was a practice shrouded in taboo and religious condemnation. Many believe a body must remain whole for resurrection. In Great Britain, the law reflected these deep-seated fears. The Murder Act of 1752 stipulated that only the corpses of executed murderers could be legally used for anatomical study, a final indignity intended as a deterrent of most heinous of crimes. But the pace of scientific discovery was outstripping the law. Across Britain, especially in centers of learning like Edinburgh and London, medical schools were flourishing, and with them, the demand for cadavers soared. With a limited number of executions, the legal supply was woefully insufficient. Anatomists needed hundreds of bodies a year, but the gallows provided only a handful. This desperate shortfall created a lucrative and illicit market. The resurrectionists stepped in to fill this void. Working in gangs, they haunted the graveyards, targeting fresh burials where the earth was still soft. Their methods were ruthlessly efficient, often using wooden shovels to muffle the sound. They would dig at the head of a coffin, pry it open, and hoist the corpse out with ropes or hooks. They were careful to take only the body, leaving behind clothes and valuables, as stealing the corpse itself was merely a misdemeanor, while grave robbery of property was a felony. Public horror and fear of the resurrectionists were rampant. Families with the means to do so employed extraordinary measures to protect their dead. Iron cages called mort safes were built over graves, and some purchased iron coffins. Others hired watchmen to stand guard through the night. But the high prices paid by anatomists, sometimes as much as 10 guineas for a single corpse, ensured the body snatchers were always willing to take the risk. Nowhere was this gruesome trade more active than in Edinburgh, a premier center for medical education in the early 19th century. The city's anatomy schools had a voracious appetite for subjects, an appetite that would lead to one of the most infamous episodes in Scottish history. This is where William Burke and William Hare enter the story. Unlike the typical resurrectionists, they didn't bother with shovels or graveyards. In November of 1827, a lodger in Hare's boarding house died while owing rent. To recoup his losses, Hare, with the help of his friend Burke, decided to sell the body to the eminent anatomist Dr. Robert Knox. They received a handsome payment of over £7, and a dark realization dawned. There was an easier way to supply the doctors. Over the next 10 months, Burke and Hare murdered at least 16 people. Their victims were often fellow lodgers or transients, individuals they lured into their rooms, plied with alcohol, and then suffocated. Their method, which left no marks of violence, became known as Burking. They sold each body to Dr. Knox, who, like many anatomists of the time, asked few questions about the origins of his anatomical subjects. The killing spree ended when other lodgers discovered the body of their final victim and alerted the police. The subsequent investigation and trial created a public sensation. To secure a conviction against Burke, the authorities offered Hare immunity in exchange for his testimony. Burke was found guilty, hanged in January 1829, and, in an act of ultimate irony, his body was publicly dissected at the Edinburgh Medical College. Dr. Knox was never prosecuted, but the scandal ruined his career. The shock and revulsion following the Burke and Hare murders, along with similar Burking crimes in London, created immense public pressure for legal reform. Parliament could no longer ignore the dangerous black market its own laws had fostered. In 1832, the Anatomy Act was passed. This landmark legislation gave doctors and medical students licensed access to unclaimed bodies from prisons and workhouses. While controversial for targeting the poor, the act effectively ended the trade of the resurrectionists by providing a legal, steady supply of cadavers for dissection. The era of the body snatchers was a dark chapter in the history of medicine, born from a conflict between scientific ambition and societal values. The grim work of the resurrectionists and the horrific crimes they sometimes inspired ultimately forced the law to catch up with science, paving the way for modern medical education.